I was showing that the material present is the only time there is. Other times, past times, future times, are abstractions. There never is anything but the present. But you mustn't, of course, think of the present as a split second. That's an abstract view of the present. You tend to think of the present as a split second because you're used to looking at a watch. And the watch is marked out with hairlines, and the idea of watchmakers is to make those lines as thin as possible, consistent with visibility. And therefore, as the hand sweeps across the hairline, you've hardly time to say now. And we begin to think that the present is that. Well, of course it isn't. Present time is rather like the field of vision, where you've got, as it were, a fairly clear center. The field of vision is an oval, and you can run your fingers around it, just at the point where they start to become invisible. And you realize that the edge of the field is fuzzy. And so in the same way, we have a vision of movement in time as having fuzzy edges. Just as when you are listening to music, you don't hear music a single note at a time. You hear it in phrases. You anticipate what's coming, and you remember what has been played. And so you have a kind of wide but fuzzy-edged view of what is called the present. But it's what there's always there, see? And if in a culture we are brought up not to see this, we start living for the future. And we live for the future mainly because our present is inadequate. And it's inadequate because we are not seeing it fully. We are seeing it in terms of abstractions. And if your present is inadequate, and is, as a matter of fact, only an abstract version of life, you're like a person with a non-nutritive diet. You always, therefore, feel hungry. And you keep eating because you want more. So in the same way, more life, please, more time, please, more, because sometime or other it's got to be all right. The thing I've been looking for must happen, I hope. But of course it never does. Not if you live that way. Because when all your goals in life are attained, and you are at the top of your profession, or you've got a beautiful children, or you whatever it was you wanted, you feel the same as you always felt. You're still looking for something in the future. And there isn't any future. Not really. And therefore I often say that only people who live in a proper relationship to the material present have any use for making any plans at all. Because then the plans work out, then they're capable of enjoying them. The other people aren't. So people then who aren't here fully, but whose minds are off somewhere else all the time, are always starved and always rushing to get there. And there's nowhere to go, except here. But I qualified this word material present because of the fact that the word material is a very much misunderstood word. It's a word you can use in a lot of different ways. As generally used, we say the body, the earth, the rocks, the trees, the animals, and all that are material. And we set over against that the spiritual, or the mental, as if that were some kind of vaguely gaseous world permeating the material world. Or perhaps not gaseous, but rather abstract. A world of ideas, a world of principles. But it's so curious that when people do that, they debase both the material and the spiritual domains of life, because these domains of life have vitality only when they're together. When you see the material as the spiritual and the spiritual as the material. And then both of these concepts tend to vanish. Because what we call the material world in this put-down sense of the word material is only a concept. If you want to conceive the world as material, then that means really people who do conceive it as material, in that sense of the word material, haven't got a good relationship to it. But if you have an immediate relationship, if you really are aware of the present, then your vision of the material world is transformed. And you see that it isn't material, it isn't spiritual, it's indefinable. It's what there is. And there is no way of saying what that is, because you can't put it into a particular category. And you can only define what you can classify.